Well, hey friends, this is Mike from Just Car People Things. Today we are working on our 2004 slightly rusty Toyota Tundra. This is going to be one of those fix-it projects we've been meaning to tackle, but as you can may notice here, my Tundra is missing the remainder of its exhaust pipe. And you can see here that that has probably succumbed to a fair level of rust quite some time ago. And you can actually order this unit from right here all the way back out through, there's a tip that exits, and you can actually see our hanger is pretty vacant here. So that rusted off a long time ago. We still had a muffler, but it's something we've noticed that we wanted to get fixed, even though the truck's not loud. So what we've done is we've come through, we've removed this initial clip right here. There was just a bolt holding that together, and this is an aftermarket replacement. This is a quiet flow. So I also noticed that slip fitting. Look at this. This is actually, I think this is how it was fixed. It was cut or somehow or another, and this is the old gasket here that's just completely deteriorating. So I ordered some parts. I'm waiting on the exhaust to arrive later today, but this is a 31631 Walker valve exhaust or flange, and that sits over the top of that right there where this old one is just disintegrating. You can see the old one coming apart right here. Then we've also got a new bracket, which is a replacement for this guy. Probably could have reused this, but for 10 bucks, might as well go for replacing it. So I think our goal right now is just to get the old exhaust removed, get the old hanger removed, and just be ready for when the parts, ooh, nice Z06, ready for when the parts show up here later today. It's a very straightforward project, obviously a little bit easier if you have a lift. We used a 13mm socket to remove the old bracket and the old bolt and the old bracket. It was a little rusty, but not too bad. Tried it initially by hand and was like, I'll get the impact. Crescent wrench. And then I like to use pry bars for when you try to pop these off. These old hangers, they tend to be kind of spongy. And what you can usually do is actually just sort of squeeze them off just like that with the pry bar. So that's what we'll be doing with that. We're gonna pop that guy off. Pop that guy off over here, just get those off, get this piece removed real quick and go from there. One thing I do find when you're working on these brackets, it's often a lot easier to hit them with a little bit of like a PB blaster or a silicone lubricant of some sort, because once you do that, things tend to slide a little bit more easily on their mounts, and that makes it a little easier to get these hangers off and slipped on and off. So nothing too complicated. It's all pretty straightforward work. These are all pretty basic hand tools. Obviously this is a little fancier, but you don't need it. And we're just gonna go through and get this thing popped off here. So we'll come right back with you once this sort of all gets cleaned up, and maybe I get some safety glasses for the garbage coming off from this old gasket. But I guess this is pretty normal for how this looks when it comes apart. The new one, literally it's a slip joint. It actually slips on there, and then that gasket compresses it. But something's not factory here and wasn't done quite right. So we're gonna get that figured. We're gonna get these popped off, and we're gonna go from there. All right, as you can see here, we've gotten the muffler off. What we did is we actually popped the chassis side off. It was a little easier with these long sloped hangers to actually get them off the chassis side with the pry bar. And of course, they're a little gross because they're coated in PB blaster, and I did have a lot of rust rain on me, but overall this has not been a particularly brutal job yet. You can see here where the old exhaust failed around this weld. My guess was this was a aftermarket muffler. These are never quite as nice as the OE ones, and it looks like that piece failed there post muffler, which was never an issue. If this was a Sequoia or a vehicle that had a passenger seating in the bed area, I'd be very nervous about that, because it would be putting exhaust up into this space and potentially up into the vehicle. Not something I'm really worried about in a pickup truck, because the actual seating area of the vehicle is way up there and, you know, really doesn't share any space with the bed. So this guy back here, we can start. You probably actually remove this one from the truck itself in this direction. You can see these are really rusty, and sadly the rust is the story for most of these old Tundras. The rust is ultimately what will kill most of them, and I'm sure this one in 5 or 10 years, if not sooner. But we've got our suspension leaf spring fixers on there. We had some noise from the leaf springs that was bugging me, so we've tried that. That's actually been super helpful. Really quieted the vehicle down. But we're gonna keep working at this, just kind of working it off. Traffic's busy today and loud, and we're gonna get that slotted right off there. That'll pop right out if I keep working at it with both hands. And then we'll get this section cleaned up. We'll get the remnants of that old gasket kind of off there. You probably even just take a metal tool of some sort and just scrape it down. Even with this like crescent wrench, I can just clean that edge up, that flange, and make that ready to accept the new part that's going on there. So yeah, you can see this old gasket just coming, kind of flaking right off. So once that's clear, the new gasket will just slot right on. It's a pretty straightforward part about how it fits, and we can put that, actually set that on there even now. Get into this thing. Go ahead and wipe that part. And that will sit, my understanding is, just like that on there. And then, of course, once everything gets junctioned together, that clamp goes on there and sort of clamps it all tight. So we'll keep working at this a little bit, and we're waiting on parts. So whenever the FedEx guy, the Amazon folks just got here, whenever the FedEx guy gets here with the remainder of this exhaust later today, we're going to complete this project. So should be pretty straightforward from here. Literally just one bolt and then a couple hangers. Well, folks, it was starting to get awful hot out. We're up into the like 80s, 90s today. So I said, no way, no thanks. I closed the door. I just turned the air con on in the shop so we don't melt out here. But threw some gloves on and got the bracket out that was lost up there. And we did just receive in the mail in the last hour or so our new replacement direct fit exhaust from Walker. You can get this online. The part number is Walker Quiet Flow SS 47774. In fact, when I bought this, believe it or not, Amazon was the cheapest place to get it, though it wasn't prime shipped. That came in basically a bundle with this gasket, the clamp. You could buy all three together. It's one of those times that the buy all three together worked. Total cost about $175. If you were looking at this as a shop, this is probably, typically parts are double at a shop, and they're going to charge you something on the order of probably $300 to $400 for this with labor as well. So we'll just go through and take a look here and see if we can't get this all unpacked. All right, that looks good. So this is obviously the back end that goes up here, and then we've got the connection in front, and then our hanger here in the back. So this is, let's see if we can't get hacked through this here. A lot of cardboard, a lot of plastic, and we'll just get this out and hopefully going in a second here. Try not to go right through my fingers while messing with my sharp Benchmade knife, which doesn't seem that sharp right now, but there we go. Got that free. And this guy's pretty light. I would say probably in the neighborhood weight-wise of about 25 pounds or so. So if you can lift stuff on your own, you probably should be able to handle this. I don't think it'd be too much trouble, but we'll go through and see if we can't peel and pry our way through this. We've got these ends really, really well tied up here. So worth mentioning, that's, now that we've got it going, that's pretty tight on there. That will let us hopefully get this end piece off here. And the tailpipe cover, which is on the back there, we can leave. So you can see here what that looks like, that flange looks like, and how that gasket then, well, there's what's left of the old one. That gasket then would fit kind of like that on there. So with that, I think we're square to go here to get this up onto the vehicle. Probably one of the two things I want to do while it's down here is throw these bushings back on to make it a little bit easier to hang. Once you get that middle part hung, life gets a little bit easier. So what I will do is take a little bit of PV Blaster here, just throw a tiny little bit in there, and that'll actually just slot right on. These should be really easy to put on, relatively speaking. just based on kind of everything and how they look and work. But those just fit right on there. And now we're gonna lift it up and try to get it into place. Wipe most of the grease off our hands here. So one thing I did do is come through and clean this junction off as best I could. We're gonna throw our gasket on there. And the way this works then, when you put this on, it then compresses that flared end up against this together, and that seals your exhaust there. So that's basically how it works. So we're gonna lift up, see if this baby fits. You will note you'll have to go over the rear axle. It's fine if it actually rests on the rear axle. You actually might make it a little easier to sort of line everything up. If you wanna do that, oops, excuse me guys. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is get this squared onto here. Then we're gonna look up and see exactly how this is gonna lift up onto those posts. We're also gonna wanna probably lubricate up those posts a little bit. One, and no penalty for overshooting here. It's just more rust preventative, I suppose. God knows we need it on this thing. Okay, and so then, now we've gotta just lift up and see if this will slot on. We'll see if we can make this work here. And you just sort of wiggle, and that will get you at least part of the way on. Chunks of rust falling, hitting you in the head. And yeah, so we're like partly on there, so you can see it just right there. And what we'll do is just keep pushing a little bit, and what you want to do is get over right there, over that lip. The tip of that has like a kind of an end on it. Same story on this side. We'll need the other hand here to lift the exhaust up and into the right sort of positioning. What are we banging on back there? Seems like we're not quite in the right spot. No, that looks about right. So sometimes this can be a bit of a juggling act here to make this all fit. You might need two hands to kind of muscle it into place. And that is almost there. Come on. Well, I'm gonna take the hat off my head so you guys don't keep getting banged by the muffler itself, but that should slot on there. I can feel it's really close. I just need to sort of get it situated in just the right spot, and we'll go from there. So cheers guys, we'll be right back with you. All right, so we are engaged in highly scientific work here, and what I realized is I couldn't get this lifted up into place over here because the bracket in the back was catching against that bumper back there. You can see this is actually with the rearmost hook. There's 3 hooks. So I slotted that up and over, which you can see is lifted up and kind of like almost hooked on top of that. And that has in turn up here lined us up almost perfectly. So should be able to, with just a little bit of finesse here, slot that right on, and that should be good to go. So I think we're in good shape here. Just get that pushed on there. Sort of feel it engaging on there. And if you get to a point where it's kind of being finicky and not cooperating, you can always come in with your pry bar, and actually once it's lined up, get on with the pry bar and just slot it right on just like that. Boom, done. So you can see, it's a little low light here, but let me get the light. That guy's hooked up, this guy's hooked up, we are good to go. So back here, we're just gonna do basically the same thing now and get this lined up and into position. Now, that's gonna be pretty difficult based on how this is set up and the design of this, just because of how it hasn't like dropped out. So let's get that down. So actually what I think I wanna do here is remove this bumper, this hanger, the rubber off there, put it on here, then slot it on from the top. I think that will actually be a little bit easier, but we'll get to that in a second. That's pretty easy. That's just more me futzing around. But what I want to show you is the clamp and the V-band here. So again, we're back to the point where this needs to get hooked together, and you can see the gaskets resting in there kind of nicely. So you've got this set up with a captured nut on the one side. This is a jam welded nut, and then this unscrews on the other. So maybe they're even the same size. Look at that, they're even the same size. So cool. So what we'll want to do is I like to completely remove this altogether from here. And this should be pretty easy to do. You need the wrench in theory. And this should spin right off. And that's going to allow this to subsequently basically spring open a little bit. So there's our nut and bolt right there. So what I like to do is spread it apart, get it around, and you'll notice this is set up for the bolt to go up from the bottom. So basically want to line all that up, get it clamped down so you can tell it's centered, squared up right about there. And you can see now how this sort of junction works, right? The way that it sort of all fits together. So we'll basically start clamping this down, and what will happen is that will draw those two pieces together. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how this works. The best way to do it, and make sure they're tight together, and then just start screwing together here. Now, this might be a bit of a reach. So that's the real question here, is getting it together to get it to start bolting to itself. But I think with a little muscle here, we might be able to get it to that jam nut into the right place. So we're gonna drop off video here. Kind of need my line of sight back from where my GoPro's sitting here in the POV. But basically we'll just squeeze those two things together until the exhaust starts junctioning, then just draw the bolt tight. That's it. Okay, I cracked the door back open because I wanted to mention something important. It was a real bear to get this hook back onto here. So if you're doing this yourself, I would actually highly recommend putting this guy in back in first. Mount the rearmost post first, then get it all lined up. At the front, you probably have the room to be able to do so, but I would do this guy first while you have the flexibility to move back and forth. But with that, my light ran dead, my battery light ran dead, so I'm gonna close the garage door behind me. But wanted to point out, did get this fully installed correctly. It did pull the junction together, and this is now a tight fit. It's not gonna go anywhere. You can see what you wanna do is actually get compression on this to where it's punching down together. So that is pretty much it. We can kind of police up all the old stuff, the old broken junk. This is garbage level hardware. Normally I say save hardware, but this stuff is going to be stuff that we're just sweeping up into a big pile and kicking out of here. So with that being said, we can lower the car down here in a second, and we'll fire it up and let you guys hear what our rusty Toyota Tundra sounds like when it actually runs with a new exhaust. You'll know very quickly if you have a leak. So thanks. There's our sweet Moto Compacto. You should check out our video on that. Okay, so everything is back together here. We're gonna jump into our rusty but trusty pickup truck. See what we get here. I don't hear any loud noises. Nice and quiet inside the cab. Let's back it out and see what we get here. We're in a hustle now because it's going to rain, and both the S2000 and the Camaro are clean. This is a good reminder of how small an S2000 is. It's down there. So, but it looks like we have some level of success here. Park this thing up and out of the way. So that's a quick repair on a 225,750 mile Toyota Tundra, which probably explains a lot of the rust underneath. But that's it. We're done. Car's filthy dirty. It's been sitting outside. My fault. Nice, new, quiet exhaust. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Appreciate you guys checking everything out. Cheers.